Hi everyone! It's the second time I'm recording a podcast episode with Steve. So I'm very glad to be seeing you guys on this live stream. And at the same time, I am doing a little bit of a recording on the side. We are recording the audio of this live so that we can put it up on our podcast, 語翻嚟學英語. And as I said, as I explained in the last episode, um, the new format of our podcast will go like this. I'll talk to Steve about various topics. And last time we were just we explained why the format of the podcast has changed. And this time we are revolving our discussion around a topic, children. Okay, we are gonna discuss this topic. 我哋會講今日會講小朋友呢一個 topic 嘅。Okay? Why do we talk about children? The thing is, when you're listening to this, if you are a listener or a regular listener of this podcast, first of all, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Second thing is, you might know and you might be aware that when native speakers talk to us, Chinese people, they often talk about their children. Those of them who have children might talk about their children a lot. It's just like talking about their pets. So those of us who have children ourselves, we might want to talk about our children when we are having a conversation with a native speaker as well, because children are very much a part of our everyday life, aren't they? So this is why it's very important to know how to talk about topics like children and cats, and dogs or pets, stuff like that, with a native speaker. And this is why today we're going to talk about children. And interestingly, how native speakers and English native speakers, namely from English-speaking countries, very interestingly, often see children in very different ways from Chinese do. And this is why we want to talk about this. And hopefully, if you know how differently Chinese people see children from English speakers, the sense of culture shock may be reduced when you go to a foreign country, because how you've seen children and how we have treated children and how we as children when we were younger were treated might be very different from the way that this is done in Western countries. So we call them Western countries, but in what I'm referring to here is European countries, American countries, North American countries, as well as such as the UK, such as the UK might not consider them part of Europe anymore. But anyways, there it goes. America, that is the US, where Steve is from, where Steve has lived a large part of his life. Canada, Australia. So we might want to know more about how English native speakers and how Chinese see children differently, how they treat children differently, and how to talk about children with English native speakers. So there goes our topic. So when I mentioned the term children or child and how the West and the East see children differently, what do you think of, Steve? What's the first thing that you think of?
First of all, compliments, because in the West, in most native English-speaking countries, people like to compliment their kids and other people's kids, and in mostly Chinese or even Japanese or Korean culture, we kind of like to talk down about our children first. It's a way to be more, let's say, polite, right? Uh, it's like don't be too proud, sort of. So I would say, let's say if you see other people's children or you talk to your own children, it's like, oh, great, good job. You hear a lot of that these days, because it's like a belief that if you give a lot of confidence to your kids, your kids would do a better job at school, or when they grow up, they will achieve more things because they believe themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is so much stronger focus on building up a child's self-esteem and self-value in the West, whereas in Asia, we focus on humility so much. Right? You need to be humble. You can't be too proud of yourself. You can't be too pleased with yourself, thinking that you have done very well. Like that's never good. So in Asia, I've noticed there are actually like fewer expressions that parents use with children to compliment them. To compliment someone is to 讚美 someone, is to 讚一個人. Okay, we can say that if we are complimenting someone, we are 讚緊佢哋. And handing out compliments and giving compliments, those are two very common expressions when we are talking about compliments. Compliment 呢個字咧，好多同學可能未必聽過都唔出奇嘅，咁啊好有用。頭先 Steve 就講到就係話，Asian parents 就唔係咁 tend to，唔係咁傾向咧去 compliment 佢哋嘅 children 嘅，但係咧。所謂嘅 Western parents，包括 European parents 同 American parents、Australian parents 呢啲 English speaking parents 咧，佢哋就好 tend to、好 used to、好慣於咧去 compliment their children. So Steve, another question that I have for you. Growing up, were you a child that always got complimented? And do you remember the best compliment that you received?
Actually, I would say I grew up in Hong Kong. With a traditional Chinese parents. And then I joined an exchange student program when I was in high school. And I lived with a local American family. And there was some cultural shock. It's just like some of the things that you just explained. And I feel like in terms, just on that compliment department, so there's a difference between old school, let's say an older generation. So my host parents in America is from an older generation. So they did. I don't think they complimented me that much. If I did something wrong, they would say, "Hey, Steve, do your homework. Don't play as much video game." Or be more responsible, right? But the new generation parents, I see some of my friends who raise their kid. They would do something like what they call compliment sandwich. Is oh hey Jimmy, you're really nice dress, like nice clothing that you're wearing today, or oh I like your hair, right? You compliment that first. And then, hey Jimmy, can you not, like 即係有時細路仔好曳啊咪 right？有時你會叫啲細路仔，oh hey Jimmy, can you not touch that DV, that my Netflix box or my TV box as much, or 有時你細路仔去人哋屋企玩，係咁撳人哋啲掣 right？
Yeah.
It happens all the time. So they would have a compliment sandwich. It's like, hey Jimmy, 你唔好咁樣。Hey, it's okay, Jimmy, but it's okay, but 即係你講嗰啲有啲餘地啦，中文叫有啲餘地。
Yeah.
Hey, it's okay, but please do not, or please, can you not, 即係咁樣好有禮貌同個僆仔講，你可唔可以唔好咁？係啦，咁之後你要再加一句喎，就話oh hey, good job doing something else, 即係你夾兩個即係讚佢，咁啊但係中間啊叫佢唔好咁做。
I heard this way of speaking, I think from some sort of corporate coach, teaching a boss how to manage his employees well. And like you have to give a compliment first, and then the compliment is followed by the real thing, the criticism, and then the criticism is again followed by a compliment, which is very interesting. By the way, guys, if you're interested in improving your spoken English with us, in November, starting from the 10th of November, Steve and I will be hosting a brand new 3-week speaking challenge. And the last time we organized this, I think starting from the mid-October, this challenge was overbooked. So it's a very popular challenge, and we are only admitting 6 people. We're only letting, in other words, 6 students enroll in this program. So if you're interested in improving your spoken English with Steve and I, please do enroll into this challenge. It's definitely going to help you because we're going to spend, I think, 2 hours every day for the 10th, the 17th, and the 24th. We are spending 2 hours. Yeah, I think that's right. 2 hours every day to help you improve your English. And don't worry if you are not able to attend every single day of the challenge because there will be I'm not sure this time if this time we didn't really record the sessions, but I don't think you need to really worry if you can't participate in all these sessions because I think it's okay to skip one session or two. The most important thing is you are able to make the best use of the time in this challenge, the sessions here, to improve your spoken English and to brush up on your communication skills. If you're interested to know more about this challenge, feel free to WhatsApp us. Our number is on the screen, 66270418. So if you're interested in signing up, please sign up through WhatsApp with my team because I'm helping Steve deal with all this admin stuff with enrollment. So Steve will be there. I'll be there. I'll be assisting Steve with his teaching work. And so I do think that it's going to be a hugely beneficial challenge for your spoken English. So remember to sign up because places are super limited. We are only letting 6 students join. So the places are definitely going to fill up super fast. Okay. By the way, what were we talking about? We were on compliments, right?
Sandwich.
Yeah, compliment sandwich, and very interesting. Do English speaking parents all give criticism this way these days? What do you think?
Okay, I would say the more, let's say, upper middle class, or people who are very educated, and people who are very conscious about this kind of thing. So this does not apply to everybody, and I would say and also it's a new cultural phenomenon. I would say of giving people compliment more, and so. For example, my host parents back when I was when I was an exchange student, they didn't give me as much compliment. They're from the what we call old school, and they're like an older generation. So they're more like I would say more similar to how many Chinese parents handle their kids. Bless you, bless you. So that's what a lot of native speaker like to say when you 打哈欠之後呢，我哋會講 bless you. And actually, there's a quick story. I think it's back in the days when there are pandemic and there are a lot of transmittals. Bless you again. So basically, after people are really sick, they would say bless you. So 打哈欠 is a form of sickness, right? So it becomes a habit. When other people 打哈欠, they would say bless you. 咁樣咯。
Yeah, definitely. And what Steve talked about was the difference between old school or traditional parents and not so traditional and the new school parents. We don't really say new school, but that's
new generation, maybe a newer generation.
And interestingly, when we're talking about compliments, speaking of compliments, I think there's a mutual friend of ours, Steve and I, who has depression. I'm not sure how severe it is for her, but she's still suffering from it. She is a she's been clinically diagnosed，即係真係診斷咗啊，係醫生診斷佢嘅。She's been clinically diagnosed with depression, and she's been taking medicine as well. She's not only receiving a counseling therapy，佢唔係淨係接受嗰啲叫做輔導嘅，佢就係要食藥嗰種啊，即係真係個 chemically 係個 brain 度係有唔同嘅。Okay, and what's very interesting, I spoke to her like 2 days ago, and she said to me that she has never ever received compliments from her parents. And actually, she's a very young person. You know that, Steve. I think she's like 16. I think she's 16. So she's very young.
Yes.
And she has never ever received any compliments from her parents. So much so that when she gets asked after she has grown up, like in a way, like in her teenage years, she's in her teenage years now. People ask her this question: what compliment is your favorite compliment? Or which compliment is your favorite compliment? And she has difficulties coming up with the answer because she actually hasn't ever received any compliment in her life from her parents. And that's such a serious thing, right? I thought that maybe it's very rare, it's natural that it's quite rare that Chinese parents compliment their children. But what's more serious about this, what's even more serious than giving out compliments rarely, is not giving compliments at all. And I was very surprised when I heard her say that, and I felt for her because I think everyone needs a little bit of appreciation, and everyone needs a little bit of compliments from time to time. And I think that could have contributed to her emotional issues. 係咯，咁就係有個朋友就係佢係從來都冇接受過 compliment 嘅。And interestingly，即係佢從來都冇俾屋企人讚過啦。And she said that when it's a very Chinese way to like go about this. When I asked her 咁可以咁樣嘅咩？從來都唔讚你，我覺得好誇張喎。即係 because maybe I'm from a very healthy family. My parents, growing up, my parents have always built me up, built my self-esteem up, stuff like that. And she said 好出奇咩？ Like 屋村係咁，like something like that. Right? This is where I'm from, and that's the way it is. And she's so used to like this way of upbringing that she said.
I think, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, like this is the story.
Yeah.
What do you think about this story?
I would say I read a lot about psychology, and when someone who is clinically depressed is like it was really severe, and they don't have as much ability to see the positive side about themselves.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with her I don't want to use the word illness, because at many point in our lives, like we will feel really depressed about ourselves, right? So I think she's in a state that she can't see a lot of positive in her life. It's part of being depressed, right? Clinically depressed. But I think her family situation make everything worse. Like poor her. Yeah. So I think both element makes the whole scenario worse. But in general, I do think our culture need a little bit. In English, we call it encouragement, right? How do we encourage people? One way to encourage somebody is to bring up something positive about that person. You don't have to be really fake. You know, 相處咗一陣先, right? You know a little bit about the other person first, and then point out a little bit of their strength, just a little bit, you know. And people like to hear good things about ourselves, right? We all do. But I would say it's a little bit too much sometimes in Western country nowadays. You only bring up the good things. Sometimes I think you need a balance, right?
Yeah, interesting.
So
And
yeah, so I think her case is very, very, it's kind of
really,
extreme, and
yeah,
also it has something to do with her diagnosed clinically clinically depressed,
your
depression.
diagnosis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and also her family is just like not helping at all.
yeah,
And in the West, that happens too because at the end of the day, we talk about our differences between cultures, right? But at the end of the day, we are all human, and most of the time, a lot of things are we're just the same. So I also want to stress this out.
and of course, there's an exception, or there are exceptions to every rule. So we are not saying that like Westerners are good at complimenting people, and like Chinese don't know how to compliment people at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. Right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. The second thing is the second difference between Western countries and like Asia is how to tell children off or how to criticize children. I think this point is so much connected with the previous one. And interestingly, we talked about the term encouraging someone a lot, and we talked about the term building someone up so much in this episode. Right? The opposite of building someone up is actually to maybe tear someone down or to put someone down in a way. 即係去 discourage 一個人啊，去 discourage 啦，你可以話 put him down 啦，你可以話 tear someone down 啦。Okay? And there are very unique expressions in Cantonese that parents use with their children to actually criticize them. And sometimes um, criticism like this or phrases like these are not very substantive, but they sound very hateful. For example, 生個叉燒好過生你. Like I have heard of this phrase, 生個叉燒好過生你. Like I'd rather give birth to a piece of pork than you. 我生個叉燒好過生. Like, have you heard of this like phrase before, Steve?
Yeah, of course, right? And I think one of my mom's favorite phrases, because she only has is she only has me, so one child, right? One child, very precious, and sometimes when I'm not behaving well, she would say something like, 誒呢度生女好過生仔啊！而家 like
Very
not in
sad.
front of me, but I'm there.
Yeah.
即係佢話
How did you
生
feel? May I ask, how did you feel when you heard that phrase?
in the past like annoyed, just annoyed because it's like you already know your mom is trying to annoy you using something negative to put off your negative. It's like for example when I'm not behaving well, or 即係其實個意思係話女錫阿媽多過仔錫阿媽 okay? That's
Yes.
that's 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 the phrase, right? Even though it's
That's
kind of true.
that's how my boyfriend's mom says it as well. Like, oh,
Yeah,
生女好過
exactly.
like they're very sad because like he's boy, why are you saying that to him? Like and
Yeah.
like
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I feel so sad when I always feel so sad when I hear my boyfriend say like his mom always tells him 生女好過啦，可以陪下阿媽啊。Like it goes on and on about his gender or his sex. And I feel so sad. Do you want him to like change his sex or some way? Do you want him to procedure or something? Do you want him to like maybe like be like Danish girl? I don't know. 真係好慘喎！咁點解咁樣去否定嗰個細路仔嘅性別咧？What do you think?
Yeah, I think is the topic we're talking about today is like a new school of thinking, right? A new school of thinking is Do not use you do not pass on your negative emotion to other people, especially to your kids. And negative emotion cannot encourage another person. You can only talk down to another person so it gets your negative emotion out at the moment. Not only is not going to help the situation, it's going to make the whole situation worse. So that's the theory of use more compliment instead of, let's say, no, that's not even a criticism. Like me and your boyfriend can't do anything about our sex, right? Like
You
we
can.
cannot do anything about it.
Technically, you can. Like,
Ah.
but it's, I doubt if you want to do this, and I doubt if
Yeah,
like he wants.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
and
I
you
think
think that
it's just
a
like
boy? Yes.
yeah. So I think it's not really just about cultural differences. It's also the level of education and also a new school of thinking. I think that is not about West or East. It's not about native speakers or not. It's really just most of this kind of knowledge or teaching, new wave of thinking usually come from Western cultures, or let's say English speaking culture, or in let's say what we call it the West. So that's really the major difference is our society. We don't change that much in that category or in that kind of like我哋嗰個社會比較傳統啲嘅，就冇咁多呢啲 new thinking 嘅嘢咯。啲 new thinking 通常係喺外國嚟噶嘛。So
I
I think that's really the difference. It's not about like I think what happened is their older generation also talk like this, like negatively. 佢哋
yeah.
老一輩都係咁嘅，都好 negative 嘅。
Yes, I know what you mean, but I think it would be better if we focused on the Western and Eastern difference this time.
Okay,
Because,
okay.
our audience, or otherwise our audience might get a little confused. I would say,
Okay.
what I wonder about is whether boys will grow up being more effeminate and girly when they get drilled into their head all the time. Like 生女好過生你啊，生女好過生仔. I wonder if they will grow up becoming more girly than boyish. Like,
Yeah, I think it's changing. Yeah, it's changing. I think one thing is our society. We're not as physical. We're not as physical anymore. What I mean is, back in the days, 你要去個田幫屋企人耕田, right? Back in the days, it's very physical. 即係好粗重嘢，做好多粗重嘢. It's like, have you heard back in the days we didn't have enough water? So in Hong Kong, there are water trucks comes into town and give us water. Yeah. Also, like in many places in Europe and in North America, back in the days, there are places that they didn't have water pipe, so they would do something like that. Or the weather gets too cold, they need to go up on a hill and chop wood with the dads. So in a way, it pushes boys to be quote unquote more boys. But nowadays, I think our society is not as physically demanding. Most of the stuff we do is all in front of our phone, right? So I think that's one reason why the difference between boys and girls is less, especially culturally speaking, talking about equality. So there's an English term called equality, 平等. It's like a new culture. It's like boys and girls. Don't try to differentiate boys and girls too early. For example, I have a cousin. She's like 4 or 5, right? But she loves cars. She loves buses. She's kind of like her dad. Probably she's more engineer minded, right? And then in the past, we would tell a girl, "Oh, just play with Barbies more. Why do you want buses or cars, right?" But nowadays, we don't encourage or discourage somebody when they grow up. Whatever she likes or he likes, we'll just let them play with whatever. Just so let that person develop who they are first, to find out who they are more first. So that's also another new generation of cultural, new generation of parenting.
Yeah. So basically, we covered 2 points. The first point is like how generous parents are when they are handing out compliments. Do they compliment their children a lot? Do they not compliment their children at all? Do they compliment their children sparingly? 好少啊, okay. The second point that we covered was how to tell children off, how to criticize them, and like in Asia and in the West, there are some differences, but Steve remarks that it could be the difference between an old school generation of parents and like a traditional like a school of parents. I think it's more of a like Western and Eastern difference. And the third thing that we might want to talk about, like, is corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is 體罰, like corporal punishment, like punishment by using violence, punishment using violence. And I remember when I started out being a tutor, and at that time I went to students' home to deliver my lessons, and at the same time I rented a classroom with a few other teachers. Like it was actually a sublease, and I was a subtenant in a classroom. 即係我係分租課室嘅 sublease 嚟嘅，佢係。And interestingly, when I went into the classroom, there was a 藤條. Like it's a rattan whip. I think it's a rattan whip I saw in the classroom, exactly. And I didn't pay much attention to it at first because I didn't grow up with that thing in my home. Like 我屋企冇藤條嘅, and I remember like used by my grandma, I think, but like my parents never used 藤條 with me, and the most
Maybe
serious
tall high slippers.
藤條 is the most horrible thing, 藤條 because it's very painful. Like you will be in great pain when you get hit by that thing. 係藤條啊. And when I first saw it, I didn't make much of it because I didn't grow up with that thing in my house, so I didn't have horrible memories around it. But like my friend came by and he said, "What the fuck? Like there's a 藤條 here." 啲藤條打僆仔嘅而家咁樣，呢間補習社攞啲藤條打嗰啲學生喎。
咪佢攞嚟掃呢個 clean dust 嘅啫，佢攞嚟掃塵嘅啫。
I'm not sure it's 雞毛掃. Two things, okay? Two things. Like there's 雞毛掃 and there's 藤條. Like, you can talk about that in your like English stand-up shows. That's so funny. Like a rattan stick, and it's like a whip. And it's so horrible. It's so scary. And you thought you were in 50 Shades of Grey. Horrible. 即係我最初係唔知啊嘛。And I think the most severe form of corporal punishment I received was I remember when I was like 10 or something. I was like 4年級 or something like that. I was very naughty and I wouldn't do my homework. 我都曾經曳過嘅. I was although I have growing up, I have often been a very good student. 我都曾經曳過嘅. And my father actually hit my legs with a bunch of newspaper. 佢係捲起咗啊嗰啲報紙咧，咁報紙係好硬噶嘛，跟住佢就打我隻腳，佢打到咧我隻腳係瘀晒嘅。 咁跟住咧
Wow.
瘀晒嘅。咁但係 but what's good, what's very impressive about my father was he actually apologized to me later, like saying that
Wow.
he actually did very badly by doing that because he regretted his actions so much. And I was so impressed by my father's action because, like, of course, I was very upset when I got hit by him, right? But I also felt a sense of regret in me. Like I knew that what I was doing wasn't right. I should have done the homework. 即係我冇做功課啦，即係冇做咗10次嗰啲嘅，仲要係咧，即係記晒落手冊嗰度嘅。咁跟住係我阿爸咧就知道啦，因為我阿媽就唔理我嘅，即係做唔做功課。但係我阿爸就知道，因為我知道咧好醒噶嘛，我知道阿媽唔理我，但我知道阿爸會鬧我，跟住我就瞞住我阿爸。So I didn't tell him that I didn't do the homework. So I was keeping like the truth from him. So I wasn't telling the truth, and
You're
so he
lying,
was
right?
very very angry. Yes, 我媽臨
You were
面
lying, right?
I was like not telling the truth. Like maybe I
Okay.
was lying as well. I don't remember. 但係我爸爸就好嬲 because he said that honesty is everything. And if you haven't done the homework, that's the first wrong thing that you've done. The second wrong thing is you have concealed it from me. 即係你做咩？第一樣嘢就你已經冇做功課係唔啱。第二樣嘢欠交功課唔啱。第二樣嘢就係你仲冇講我知。So he hit my legs, like my 小腿啊，with like 我唔知點樣講啊。Like he rolled up the newspaper into like a bunch of it.
A
Like,
bunch, I think a roll up newspaper. Just roll up
no,
newspaper.
rolled up piece,
Roll up,
roll
yeah, roll
paper.
up. 一
He
捲
rolled
咗
up
埋啊！
捲起啦，and he hit my legs like so hard, and he like so scolded me for like 2 hours straight, and like my legs, 2 legs I think, got bruised, like the
Wow,
whole
that's really hard. Like the hits must be
yeah,
really
好
hard.
痛嘅，即係嗰個。And the thing is, what's funny? I think it's very funny. Like looking back, it's very funny. The second day I had to go to school, right? Because you can't like take leave just because of that. And when I had to go to school, it was I think autumn, I think, and it's not super hot in Hong Kong. It's not super cold in Hong Kong. It's a little chilly maybe, but it's not cold, right? And I had to wear 嗰啲叫做絲襪 and the 絲襪 and the stockings are blue in color, are like deep blue in color. 即係佢哋係深藍色嗰啲絲襪咧。Actually, like students wear 深藍色絲襪 only when it gets freezing, right? But I was wearing 深藍色絲襪 when I was going to school in autumn. And the reason for this is my mom was a social worker. She knew that if I went to school with those legs, my dad could be in trouble. Right? So this was why I wore 藍色絲襪. And like what's I think the most impressive thing about this was my dad actually apologized to me after this. And he said like he was too harsh on me. What he said was right, but he was using the wrong way to say it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's impressive. Maybe he's
Yeah.
afraid of the police.
I don't think so. I think the police like no evidence anyway, right? 即係嗰啲語 and he could just deny it. Like yeah, corporal punishment. Growing up, were you like physically punished?
Oh yeah,
at all?
yeah, totally. Yeah, I grew up in a traditional Chinese household,
Yeah.
so everything they use everything on me.
Did you remember
And you know,
anything?
the funny thing is, I think back, it's like, yeah, I kind of deserve some of that. 我係嗰啲好懶啊，又中意拖嗰啲細路嚟嘅。Like I like to procrastinate 即係拖做嘢，拖延。I like to procrastinate， 即係我會做功課嘅。我基本上it's like basically I would finish all my homework, but I was like I'll be late. I'll like make up my homework tomorrow, you know. And also of course you would be doing a horrible job, right? If you procrastinate all the time. And actually it does hurt you in life later on. And I guess I learned my lesson now. But 即係你細路仔做啲唔好嘢咧，你大個之後你會受翻，right？ It's like when you grow older, your boss or your client or your even the girl or guy you like, if you don't you're not as responsible, these people will leave you, right? Or then you get fired or you get yelled at by your boss, right? So it comes back. So I think in a way is it's a good reminder. You need to tell your kids, hey, you're doing something wrong. But in the most native speaking English native speaking world, people basically what they call is like timeout. So they don't hit their kids because hitting their kids is like a big deal. Like anybody, your neighbors, your teacher, anybody who know of this can call the police, and they will actually have the police arrest you and separate your kids, right? So it's a big deal. So what they do to tell their kids not to do something is called timeout. Okay, I'm gonna give you a timeout. 咁啊，因為外國啲地方比較大啲啊，咁可能喺你間房你自己今個禮拜唔俾你玩，oh it's time out. Like you just gotta stand there, or you sit there, but you can't play with your toy, or you can't play with your video game, something like that, right? Or no allowance this week, something like that. That is, I think a lot of younger Chinese parents also do that now. They learn from that kind of style. Yeah, so this is how most I would say. I don't know about Eastern Europe or Southern Europe, but most Protestant countries, Protestant, most Protestant country nowadays, they
某
do
種基督
not,
教
yeah. They do not hit their kids, or they don't prefer to hit their kids at all. And then I don't know if it's the UK, but at least in North America, they use that timeout culture. 好啦，停啦，即係你等你玩緊嘅話，你好點都好 timeout 啦。
And
Yeah.
those are very different schools of thought, I think. And I think the reason that my dad used to cite for like hitting me was 佢覺得細路仔係唔明白邏輯嘅。And like all children understood was physical pain. 即係佢係明白 pain 啦，佢明白 pleasure 啦，即係好 animal 嘅。佢哋覺得 children 係，所以佢哋就覺得 like if you reason with a child, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, that's so wrong. By the way, that is so wrong. I think kids up to a certain age, even when you're at 3 or 4, you start develop a sense of right and wrong. You know what's right, kind of, and you will start to know what's wrong. So, and I think we're kind of developing a version of ourselves, and who we are today when you're an adult is really kind of like looking back. When you're a kid, you're just an older version. You're just an older version of that. That's it. But 你細個做啲錯事咧，你大個只係一個會加強，即係放大咗個版本嘅啫。So it's just like kind of is a way to make sure you don't do all these wrong things when you grow older, or you just don't do it as much. 即係好似我哋拖你時間或者你唔做功課 right? It's universal. It's universal. 即係個個人都會有懶嘅時候 right? But it just like find a way for us to understand, hey, there's a consequence. So the consequence in most more like most new style of reminder, the way to remind you, hey, it's not cool, it's time out. And I think back in the day, it's just like 報紙 or 藤條. I think that's really the difference. It's like you have to tell your kids. I think even in the West or in the countries that we mentioned, they also understand you got to tell your kids, you got to say no at some point, right? Hey, this is wrong. You got to tell your kids. You cannot just say, oh, keep going. Oh, you're very good. Like you can't just say that all the time. So at a point, it just really the difference is how do you tell your kids? How do you get that message of no to your kid? It's like what's the best way? I think that's really the major difference.
Parenting is such an art, isn't it?
Exactly.
And let's talk about the last point. The last point that we have is expectations. Like it's commonly known and like arguably it's universally known that Asian parents expect a lot of their children. And Asian parents, they often expect their children to grow up being professionals. They want them to work as professionals. They want them to work as, say, doctors, engineers, lawyers, accountants, 嗰啲唔同嗰啲師啊，咩律師啊、會計師啊、工程
Being
師啊，
a
it's many
high-paying professional, right?
high earning,
High-paying professional.
Yeah, and I'm not. I don't think. I think this kind of expectations are kind of like not as strong these days. Like they feel that like their children can grow up studying something 搵唔到食啊. It's like that don't pay, like subjects that don't pay well, like archaeology. Yes, you can go study archaeology, study something you like or you can go study history. Go, like you can go study something you like, or like like history, archaeology, like physics, chemistry. Even if they think that the subjects aren't going to pay well and the jobs in the fields aren't going to pay well, they like these days they tend to encourage their children to like pursue these subjects more, especially I think in middle class and upper class families. Of course, this isn't always true, right? There are always exceptions to the rule. There are also like 有啲好有錢嘅人啊, they still expect their children to be professionals, and they still expect their children to like earn their first bucket of gold in the first year, they become millionaire the first year you are in the job market. 即係佢哋都會有啦. But these days, I think in general, the trend would be to encourage your child to study whatever that interests them. Yeah. And so this is what I've observed. What do you think about the difference between the expectations that Western and Eastern parents have for their children?
So I think it comes down to, so my observation is it comes down to how the parents see economics and also how their society handle their economic differences between the rich and the poor. So in countries where they have a huge difference, I mean, basically economic security is like a mindset, how they view economic security. 點樣翻譯啊？即係 economic security
經濟穩定。
security 啦，係啊，經濟穩定。I think it's really about the country's culture and also the families, how they see economic security. And the people who don't see people who rank economic security very high, they will push their kids, right? Make sure you get a really, really good, high-paying professional job. And the parents or the places where they see economic security as, all right, it's okay, it's important, but it's like, well, but we also want our kids to develop as a whole person, right? It's like, oh, okay, it's okay for you to study art, it's okay for you to study philosophy or things like that, right? Just do whatever you're good at or whatever you like, right? I think that's really the major difference. And in the West, I think in general, like okay, there's a term called developed country. In most developed country, their economic security is slightly better, so people have more wiggle room. Wiggle room 係點樣翻譯啊 ？Wiggle room，to wiggle room 即係有多啲空間啊，俾你去for you to develop, right? Develop as a whole person. So they would tell the kids, "Oh, just go to do whatever you want, or just be who you are." So they would do things like that more. But if you're more, let's say, an immigrant, 移民啊，即係如果你係移民嘅家庭咧，即係 immigrant，especially Chinese, Indian and Jewish，因為 Jewish 咧佢哋嗰個咁多代以嚟咧，都係俾人壓迫，right？ It's like Indian, Chinese are also similar in similar situation. So their parenting would push their kid to be more like, oh, get a professional degree, or don't study art. Study engineer is way better than studying art, right? Something like that. There is that tendency. 即係 tendency 點翻嚟嘅 tendency
有傾向，
傾向 right? Yeah. So there's such tendency, and I think that's really the major difference.
Yeah.
How they see economics later on in their lives or in their children's life.
Yeah. And there's a relatively healthier saying these days, 行行出狀元, meaning that whatever you study, like whatever subject that you study, whichever subject that you study, you are going to do well as long as you are good at it. 即係每一行都會有一個精英嘅人，每一行亦都有廢嘅。So it depends on how well you fare yourself. It all depends.
Yeah. I think there's a fight between two culture or two school of thinking. One school of thinking is, oh, dream big, just follow your dream. But there's a new school of thinking that is like, before you follow your dream, learn about the discipline, learn about learning. Life never stop learning. And also life never stop unlearning things, unlearning not something that's not working, right? So I think there's a different school of thought, and I think we need both. We need dream, but also we need how to achieve your dream, not by sitting around and thinking you're going to be successful at the end. What's that?
You need to dream big, but you need to be practical as well. Like you need to have a vision, but you need to know how to execute as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a new school of thought is in our world, mostly Chinese speaking world, the degree is very important, but it's very important. But in the West, especially in America, because people borrow a lot of money to go to school or go to college, and then after they graduate, they have a hard time paying back the loans. So there's a new school of thought is actually be practical. Not everybody have to have a degree, but learn about working. Working is about attitude, right? Learning how to listen to people, learn how to, learn new knowledge every day or every week or, every once in a while. And then unlearn the bad habits you have. I think this is way more important than getting a degree. So this is like a new school of thought nowadays that is competing with each other, but I don't think they should compete. It's like you should dream, but also keep growing, right? So it's not just about your degree. It's about how to live your life and provide to your family, and hopefully 你社會又會有用。中國人好中意用呢句話啦。How you can help other people, something like that.
Yeah. So speaking of learning and speaking of unlearning bad habits, remember to enroll into our 3-week speaking challenge. I will have to incorporate this call to action. I remember to enroll in the 3-week speaking challenge, so you can see that actually when Steve and I do these conversations on the podcast, we haven't written a script. Okay, so there's no script to follow. We only came up with the talking points, using 15 minutes, and then we talked in the like recording session. So this is how we roll. This is how we do it. And I think it's going to be a very useful skill for you, knowing how to speak like this spontaneously and fluently. And I do believe that after you have heard us speak on this podcast, you know that we are qualified to teach you. We are qualified to help you learn. We are qualified to help you get better. And so if you're interested in improving your spoken English with us, please join our 3-week speaking challenge. Don't hesitate to enroll into sign up. Like it's on the 10th, the 17th, and the 24th of November. And we are both pretty busy people. Like sometimes on some of the nights in a week, Steve has his comedy shows, and sometimes I have to do my lessons with other students. And this is why, like, these dates are the dates that we've come up with. And we are only admitting 6 students, and this is why we want you to sign up as soon as you can. The 10th, the 17th, and the 24th, the challenge, the sessions will be from 7:30 to 8:30 and 8:45 to 9:45. You will have plenty of opportunity to ask questions, because we'll have 15 minutes of break, and we'll also be practicing throughout the 2 sessions in the night. And all of you guys who join the challenge will have the chance to speak, because you guys will take turns to speak, and we'll be commenting on how well you've done, and we'll be giving you feedback as well. So it's going to be super useful for improving your spoken English. So if you're interested in joining this challenge, please WhatsApp us at 66270418. By the time I'm speaking, I think one to two of you have already messaged us telling me that you want to join. So please hurry up. The places could be running out really soon. And yeah, this is it. So last minute word, Steve?
Just if you guys like our conversation, if you think this will help you a lot, and also, by the way, we do live translation. So if you don't understand anything during the class, then we can translate Chinese to you. So that makes this really helpful for many
And
of you.
definitely don't worry if you don't understand what we say, because we will translate it for you. And those of you who are listening to this podcast, I do feel that you are determined to improve. Like otherwise, you wouldn't have stayed until the end. This is why I think that signing up for this challenge is definitely such a good practice. It's good exercise for your mouth and for your brain, because it's going to force you in a way. It's going to motivate you to speak as much as you can during those periods. And it's like, to be fair, there's not much of a point listening to us ramble on and speaking to each other, because at the end of the day, it's not you who's speaking. If you want to improve your English, it has to be you who speaks, not listening to us. Only listening to us won't help as much. You will have to put what you have heard and what you've learned to use, isn't it, Steve?
I think there's a big difference between learning from an app than learning from bilingual teachers like us. We can translate to, like, in a more like real life. How would a native English speaker talk? We would translate that in Chinese if you don't understand at that moment. And I think we have a lot of different topics that you don't get from getting reading from an app. So I think there is a lot of advantages learning from us.
You can learn how to talk about your hobbies, your childhood and art, work, study, neighbors. There are so many topics that you can learn how to talk about. And as Steve has said, not only are we bilingual teachers, I think what's nice about joining our challenge is that when you're joining through an app, let's say, I don't mind saying the names, because I think everyone knows the apps like Lingoda and like italki, like apps like that. Like, you don't know the teacher personally. We don't know the teacher personally. They are employees or freelancers or working for a company. Whereas for us, for Steve and I, we are content creators and we are showing up our faces in podcasts or live streams like these. So you might feel that you've known us for some time and you trust us because you have listened to our content, you have heard us speak here. So you know what we are like. Okay. So I think that's one thing that you might want to take into consideration when choosing the right courses for you. And anyway, I hope that you guys will be able to get some practice and like you can improve your English every day. Like work on it. Okay. So I'll see you again very soon. And see you in the next episode next Friday. Bye.
Thank you for having me, guys.